What happens when a man conquers the entire known world but doesn't live long enough to govern it? At the age of 32, Alexander of Macedon fell mysteriously ill in Babylon and died. He left behind a territory stretching over 2 million square miles, from the Mediterranean Sea to the Himalayas, without leaving a clear heir. This map shows the immediate, chaotic aftermath of his death. A unified world rapidly shattered into warring factions as his top generals turned on each other in a brutal scramble for control. Alexander's story maps the boundary between grand conquest and total collapse. It tracks the point where human ambition collides with human mortality, leaving a massive, destructive vacuum in its wake. His drive began in the Macedonian royal court. Tutored by the philosopher Aristotle, the young prince developed a dangerous obsession with the Iliad, modeling himself directly after the mythical, tragic hero Achilles. That obsession turned into violent action when he was just 20 years old. Following the assassination of his father, King Philip II, Alexander purged his political rivals and seized the throne. He immediately displayed an aggressive, unorthodox mindset. Where previous rulers negotiated complex political problems, Alexander preferred to destroy the rules completely. According to legend, when presented with the Gordian knot, an impossibly tangled rope that promised the rule of Asia to anyone who could untie it, he didn't bother trying to unravel it. He drew his sword and sliced it in half. That exact mentality carried him across the Hellespont and deep into the Persian Empire, triggering a decade-long undefeated march of conquest. He decimated the sacred band of Thebes, broke the siege of Tyre, and crushed the Persian king Darius III. His early victories proved his ambition was an unstoppable force of nature that flattened anything standing in its path. This map shows the sheer scale of his dominance. In under 10 years, his forces swept from Greece into Egypt, tearing across the Persian Empire. Swallowing these territories, he absorbed their titles: Pharaoh of Egypt, Shahanshah of Persia, and Lord of Asia. He attempted to forcibly merge the cultures of East and West, establishing dozens of new cities, mostly named Alexandria, and taking a Sogdian princess named Roxanne as his wife. But his demands went further. He required his Macedonian generals to perform proskinesis, the traditional Persian act of bowing down to the king. To the Greeks, this was a ritual reserved exclusively for the gods. Alexander had convinced himself of his own absolute infallibility. He was no longer ruling as a Macedonian king, he was operating as a living deity. But pushing an army thousands of miles from home carries a psychological toll. As they marched deeper into the unknown, Alexander became intensely isolated, paranoid, and physically exhausted. During a drunken argument, that paranoia boiled over. He threw a spear and murdered his loyal friend, Clitus the Black. Clitus was the general who had saved his life at the Battle of the Granicus. Alexander wept for days afterward, but his commanders could no longer unsee the act. Their loyalty, once absolute, was replaced by a quiet, calculating fear of their king's erratic temper. The physical breaking point arrived in India, at the Bios River. Drenched by monsoons and bleeding from continuous combat, his exhausted men dropped their weapons and refused to march further. Faced with a mutiny from the very soldiers who had conquered the world for him, the invincible king had to do something he had never done in his entire life: turn back. The momentum of the campaign finally yielded to the mortal limits of the human beings he led. Even an undefeated king could go no further than the men carrying his shields. The long, grueling march back to Babylon completely halted the momentum of the empire. In 323 BC, Alexander contracted a sudden fever. Historians still debate whether it was malaria, typhoid, or a cup of poisoned wine from his own resentful generals. As he lay dying, his commanders gathered around his bed and asked who should inherit the empire. Alexander reportedly whispered his final decree: to the strongest. Looking at the map, we see the catastrophic fallout. His top generals, the Diadochi, immediately launched a ruthless civil war that carved the map of the empire into rival kingdoms. The political structure he built could not exist without him. It was entirely dependent on his physical presence, and it died the exact moment he did. Yet, while his physical government collapsed, his cultural vision survived and thrived across the territories he conquered. His conquests birthed the Hellenistic period. He established more than 20 cities, built trade networks connecting disparate continents, and made the Greek language the lingua franca of the ancient world. That massive cultural fusion allowed ideas to travel from Greece to India, laying the vital groundwork for the eventual expansion of the Roman Empire and the spread of early global religions. Alexander's life proves that a single, fiercely driven mind can bring the entire known world to its knees, but no mortal can truly hold it forever. If you want to witness more stories of the rise